how do you differentiate yourself in the market, right? So how do you be a little bit different? And I didn't want to create advertisement or do something focused on myself. But I really felt that people needed to learn from other entrepreneurs and what they were doing and what their journey was. The idea.
We love the San Gabriel Valley. There are some amazing people and businesses here, and we think they deserve the spotlight. Welcome to the SGV Master Key Podcast. We'll have on the people that make the SGV great. We'll find out what makes them tick, their ups and downs, their history, and we're going to have fun doing it. This is the SGV Master Key Podcast. And now your hosts, Scott Warmoth and Russell Mano.
All right, SGVers, welcome back to another episode of the SGV Master Key Podcast. If you are new here, welcome. We take a deep dive into the people that make up this great community. And if you are a returning listener, thank you for listening. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Right before we came in, Scott, I told Victoria that I'm glad I don't have to be in front of the camera because we just had lunch together. And I think I would be feeling a little sleepy or not my best.
I hope this is not one where I fall asleep, but I don't think it will.
No.
At least I cleaned my shirt, though.
Oh, yes.
We were going to have a little contest. What did Scott have for lunch?
Indeed. And I'm so glad we went there today because it's Ari Rang, right? Right off of Valley Boulevard. But for that information of like where to go and things that are going on, check out San Gabriel Valley Now. They're your source for city news, announcements, events, special savings, and everything SGV. Check them out on Instagram, sgv.now, and read their new SGV Now magazine on their website, sgvnow.com. Well, our podcast was just a thought in April of 2020 and launched in October 2020. And we've been going for 2 years, Scott, with I think close to 80 episodes now. And in the podcast world, most don't make it past, I think, 10, and very few make it past 25. And that says a lot for where we are. But, podcasting is becoming more and more popular. And
they're like people, all shapes, all sizes.
Yeah. I speak to some guests, to most of the guests, all of the guests, to prepare them to come on and ask them, do they listen to podcasts? And oftentimes they'll say, yes, a crime podcast. Like it's very popular.
Yeah. Well, crime is always an enthralling subject for people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to work at newspapers, and the crime beat is a prime beat, and you always have to have the crime beat in a newspaper. I remember I would go to the sheriff's station every Friday. This was before internet, of course, and go through all the police reports because we wanted to pick out the most interesting ones and run them in the newspaper.
Sure. Yeah. And, it's so interesting, this world of podcasting and self, publishing, self-producing and putting yourself out there. It's, how recent was it where you couldn't do this, right? You had to go through so many things to be able to have platform and now you can just create your own and attract, the people, the audience that you want and talk about the things that are important to you. It's really a fascinating time.
Right. And our guest today has done his own podcast for several years and has learned the new technologies as well, where, he can do a podcast without having to bring people together.
Yeah.
So
I'm interested to hear more about his podcast and his story. Let me introduce our guest. His name is Alex Bruno. He's an attorney, and like Scott said, he's a podcaster. Alex, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Russell, and thank you, Scott. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your connection to the San Gabriel Valley.
Well, my connection to San Gabriel Valley, I would say, is there's pivotal points in my life, and there's which brings my connection to San Gabriel Valley. My office is in Glendale, but when I met my wife and we started dating, she lived in Monterey Park. So I spent a lot of time in Monterey Park. She moved to Alhambra, still spent a lot of time in Alhambra. And when I decided to actually, about 10 years ago, leave the national law firm I was at, my partner at the time was in Monterey Park. So I always kept bringing me back to San Gabriel Valley. So I spent a lot of good time in there, and it really was a focus of, pivotal moments in my life.
Well, Scott and I have a real strong connection to Monterey Park. That's where I grew up. My childhood was in Monterey Park.
And my first office was Monterey Park. Yeah, Monterey Park is kind of a key city, but it's not a probably well-known city. It's not Pasadena.
Right.
But it's a key city for especially the community that our practice is in, which is Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
The first, I believe, the first majority Chinese city in the country.
Oh wow!
Yeah. It's sort of historic in that way.
So that's your excuse me. So that's your connection to the San Gabriel Valley. As I mentioned before, you are an attorney. Tell us a little bit about that.
So as an attorney, I represent business owners, entrepreneurs, companies with all their legal stuff, from starting them up to helping them with, making sure they're in compliance, to when it's time for them to sell their company, or if they hit that age where like they want to retire and give the company out to their employees, we're there to help. And that's another connection to San Gabriel Valley, because a lot of my clients come from here.
Mm. And so how do you go from attorney to podcaster?
I think like a lot of people were thinking about, how do you differentiate yourself in the market, right? So how do you be a little bit different? And I did not want to like, I don't know, create advertisement or do something focused on myself. So, but I really felt that people needed to learn from other entrepreneurs and what they were doing and what their journey was. The idea of podcasting came up, and we mentioned off the air that one of the first podcasts that I listened to was a crime one called Serial. And that's Serial as in Serial, not cereal as in Lucky Charms.
At first I was like, oh, maybe you're really into cereal.
So when I was talking to the people that work with me on marketing, we were talking about, why don't we do a podcast? And this was about late 2018, early 2019. And it sounded like a great idea, because it was an opportunity for me to be there, but not me be the focal point, and to highlight people. And I'm a big believer in, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of people who have done things before you, and let's learn from their positive things that's happened, as well as the mistakes that happened when you're going to try to do your own entrepreneurial journey.
Right. So this show is about the people of the San Gabriel Valley, their journey, and a big part of what we do, and I think what you do, is to share those failures, those the lessons that they've learned. How did you come about to be where you are today? What is your early childhood like?
Early childhood. I grew up in the Los Angeles area. I was born. I always like to say I am a native Angelino, if you can say that. I was born in the Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital, and so I was like, I'm native LA through and through. And grew up. It was just me, my mom, and my brother. So a little bit of a different experience for a lot of people, and I'm from Generation X, so the latchkey generation for some of us. So I grew up with that as well, and so that was an interesting experience for me, because you learn very early on to be independent, even though you don't want to be, but you have to be. But it has shaped me in terms of who I am now, and went to high school in Glendale too. That's what kind of full circle there with my office back in Glendale, and I'm here now.
Latchkey. So I've heard that referred to. I think I'm also latchkey. I'm born in '79. But what does that really mean? Like you're sort of given a key, and after school you had to go home. Is that it?
That's correct.
Okay.
Like you'd find your way home, and if it was your mom or your dad, or your mom and dad wouldn't come home till like maybe after dinner or right at dinner. They're not picking you up from school.
Okay.
You find your way home, and you have your own key, and lock the door, make sure no strangers come in.
Okay, that was definitely me. Yeah. Okay, and then so where did your journey go after high school?
High school, I went off to Berkeley for undergraduate studies. Did my 4 years at Berkeley, and really enjoyed the experience. And after Berkeley, I went right straight into law school at UCLA, where I studied for another 3 years. Fortunate enough to pass the bar the first time, because that's always the big fear, big concern for young lawyers. And then I started working I actually graduated right in 2000, which was not the greatest time, because that's the time when the first .com bust happened. So all the law jobs kind of went away, because there was no more money. And so I went and worked for a couple boutique firms before I landed with a national firm, helping multinational companies with all their legal stuff, realizing that I had my own entrepreneurial journey to follow. I had that spark in me and said, why can't I scale this for companies that are local? Why can't I scale this for businesses that are local, for California companies? That's where I came up with the idea of starting my own law firm.
Wow. I want to sort of back up a little bit because you shared a little bit of your story to become, who you are and sort of like a little bit of your family background. What really struck me was that you shared that you were the first of your family to go to college. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I was speaking to Scott that, in this San Gabriel Valley community, the jump from a generation where, your parents didn't go to college, that's already pretty remarkable. But you not only just went to college, you went to law school, UCLA, and then you also had this entrepreneurial journey. So, if you didn't have that modeled for you, where did that come from?
That's true. It wasn't modeled for me. And so it was a big challenge because there was a lot of limiting beliefs that I was trying to fight against. And so it definitely wasn't modeled for me. It was just in something kind of in a way innate. I really wanted to be a lawyer. And back then I thought being a lawyer was being in the courtroom all the time, being like, cause that's all you saw on TV. So I thought that's what you had to do. So I was really pushing to be like kind of like a courtroom lawyer, realizing early on in the practice that's not what I wanted to do. That wasn't fit with my personality type. But it was just something I just was, for some reason inside, I wanted to go this route.
So there's no one particular event that motivated you or stimulated you to go to law school?
Not necessarily to go to law school. I mean, I did see that there was a certain, what I would say, kind of not necessarily power, but a certain amount of like you can get things done as a lawyer. And my mother, we mentioned my mother earlier. She was a reluctant, I call her a reluctant entrepreneur. She was an entrepreneur because she had to be. She was a hairstylist, so she would do that, but she had her own business. And I observed growing up how sometimes she couldn't get certain things done. And I was, even at a young age, trying to interpret things for her. And not necessarily interpret language, but just interpret it. What does this mean? It's in English, but I still don't understand it. And to this day, that's what I do.
Right. Yeah. I've always felt a legal education is of benefit to anybody in a society like ours, right?
That's right.
You need to know certain things just to get by. So that's what your mother lacked, and you just felt that's something you want to have.
It's definitely something I want to have and something I want to share with others who were, I would say, would kind of step in my mother's shoes. And it doesn't matter the level of sophistication or level of education too, because you could be college educated, you could have a PhD, you still don't have that legal education of what does this mean.
Mm-hmm. So are you first generation?
That's always a debate. I guess I am, but my mother was born in Texas. My father wasn't born here. My father was born in Mexico.
Okay.
So it's always like, what does that mean in terms of? I have a friend who really studies this stuff, and he gave me a great interpretation of it. But depending on who you ask, I could be first, I could be second.
Yeah, right. Well, you have two parents with different, I guess, home countries.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned you worked for a national law firm. Is that what you said? And so while you were there, were you like wanting to break free, or did you enjoy your time there?
I enjoyed my time there. I did enjoy my time there, but I did have, I like to say, I said this already, but I did have that spark of like, I don't want to be in this kind of systematized process. And sometimes the national law firms have these system processes. You got to pay your dues. You got to do certain things. And then at some point, we're going to let you elevate and evolve. And I had a desire to go beyond that. I had a desire also to kind of pick my clients, which was important to me.
So a lot of people who are in a corporate job wanting to do more, they will go through this cycle where they need to work, but they want to escape, and they're too tired, and they can't find that time. I think a lot of people experience that. How did you overcome that, or how did you finally, leave there and start your own?
That's a great question, and this is interesting, Russell, because I don't think I've been asked that question and how I did it. What I did, it was when I had that spark in, I was fortunate enough from my college classmates. Some people have already went out on their own. They're already doing their own businesses. So I reached out to them first saying, I'm thinking about doing this. What do how do I do it? And we kind of talked about things. Of course, got the approval with my wife because it was going to affect us. I wanted to talk to my wife about it and say, this is what I wanted to do. And of course, me being the planner that I was, I started to plan.
Okay. So the first jump was from the national firm to your own law firm. Is that correct?
With the partner. I had a partner at the time.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And so you built that up, and then at what point did you decide you wanted to do the podcast?
So this was so we started in 2011, 2012, the firm, and the podcast came in around 2018. By that time, I had my own practice. I was no other partners. So it was around 2018, and it was an idea of how do we structure, some form of, I will say it again, it's a form of marketing, but I also want to be very educational with what we're doing. So I wanted to show, I wanted to kind of demonstrate people who have done it, because I'm a firm believer, again, if you see someone do it, it's sort of like when you see these people breaking records. So we're right at the end of baseball season. Aaron Judge is big in the news right now, breaking the Roger Maris's record for the American League. Sometimes when you see that, it's possible. And so when you see it and you know it's possible, or you hear it and you know it's possible, you can go ahead and do it yourself. And so I was like, how do we do it? Let's put in the podcast. And similar to what you have the setup here is we had the mics, we had the we had the mixer or the recorder, and I still have that material. So every once in a while I'll do lives, which is much more, actually it's fun, because we're doing, because we actually see each other instead of behind screens. But a lot of my guests now are all over the country, so I'm actually able to use another platform to record remotely. So
I'm interested on the process that you took to get started, because I think everybody sort of takes their own path, right? And getting equipment, and so did you start off small and sort of learn along the way, or did you get everything solidified in your mind on how you wanted to be before you started? How did that go?
That's a good question. I tried to be as prepared as possible, and I think like any new journey, you're gonna miss something, right? So you're gonna miss something. I was fortunate enough, and I'm still fortunate enough, that I have a producer who helps me. So she was really she and her team knew what equipment I needed to acquire and all that stuff. So we were able to acquire the equipment. The equipment's the easier part. The other part's the more challenging part is kind of structuring it. And we were talking offline, I structure it in terms of seasons. And so I like to have certain seasons where we have a theme in it. And having a theme is going to help guide me in terms of kind of identifying what kind of guests I want to have on there, and kind of keep people kind of engaged. So the first season was focused on people who were involved, entrepreneurs that were involved with food. So, one of our guests, and he's a guest of SGV as well, was Barney Santos, and he was going to start his food hall. And so we had him on. We had someone who had food tech. So we had a bunch of stuff like that. And so every season had some kind of process to it. But I think the key point was kind of deciding, like anything you do in a journey, is what's the purpose of it. And so the purpose of it was me to kind of provide a platform, provide an ability for people to really get inspired. So if you're on that, you ask me, like a lot of people think about doing something on the side, but they don't have the energy to do it. How do we provide people with a little bit more push to again say, hey, this person did it. This other person started this whole food tech delivery app. What do you think about that? And things like that. So that way people would be very motivated to pursue their dream.
Was it scary when you first hit the record button?
Oh yes. I'm very comfortable right now, because I've been on the front of the mic so much now. But before it was, I think even when I was doing solo shows, because sometimes you'll do your intros, you do your other things, and it took a lot of time trying to get the right space, trying to get the right, make sure it's comfortable enough, and feeling comfortable with it. And then of course when we added the element, so I didn't have video right off the top. I was pure audio. I think the first season's pure audio. And then when we added the video element, that's also another thing, because you're trying to okay, make sure you look at the camera, make sure you do this, make sure you're not like scratching your head, stuff like that. But now it feels a lot comfortable.
Wow. So your podcast is Biz Mode.
Yes.
And you do it solo?
I'm the only host. Yes.
Right. Okay. And you've got a new season starting up soon. What is this season? Is it baseball season or
no?
What? Okay.
Even though I'm a baseball fan, I'm a Dodgers fan too. So no, the new season is going to be focused on breaking barriers, and so it's more of like the next level of entrepreneurship. So I think a big hurdle for people as entrepreneurs is to get over the hump of, can I do this? Then they do it, but then when they do it, they still have this level of fear, level of risk of extending themselves further. And so what I want to explore and what we've been exploring with our guests so far is how they've broken through barriers, like how they've broken through these limiting beliefs that they may have, whether they were, cultural beliefs, internal beliefs, external beliefs. How do you break through it? Because what the first step is getting out there and saying, I'm going to do this business. The next step is saying we can go farther.
You've used the term limiting beliefs, I think at least twice on the show now. And that's a term where, you have to have a certain level of emotional intelligence to even have come across it and to understand it. And, I'm still struck by your, to overcome whatever limiting beliefs that you may have had. Maybe someone like myself may have had a poverty mindset and I needed to overcome. And that's a limiting belief. But yeah, so you've obviously done some work to understand these things, right?
Yes, I have. I've done a lot of work, not just myself. You've got you work with people, you work with coaches, you work with therapists to kind of go through it. But of course, it's a lot of internal work. Trying to figure things out and trying to figure out what can stop you, what's preventing you from things, and sometimes it's just as simple as someone telling you no early on and you feeling that sting of rejection. And then figuring out, okay, yes, you can do it. So it's just it's taken a lot of reflection, a lot of writing, a lot of journaling. I journal a lot, but it's something I'm still working at myself personally.
What was the greatest challenge that you had to overcome with your show?
For me, it was initially it was the idea of rejection. It was the idea of asking someone to be on the show and them saying no.
Wow. And
so, because I didn't like people saying no to me.
Has that happened?
It has.
And how do you take it?
Well, I'll answer it in two different formats, right? So early on, I was, it would upset me. Like early on, it would upset me, and it's kind of like you feel. For me, I personally felt rejected, even though it wasn't really about me. It could be different circumstances and all that stuff. Now, it just kind of washes away. It's kind of like, okay, let's go on to the next. Okay, that one said no. The next one's going to be a yes, and now it's more of like
now it doesn't matter.
My mindset has shifted a little bit. Mm-hmm. And they're missing out if they don't go on our show. So that's another thing.
Well, thank you for not taking out your vengeance on us.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for not rejecting us because I would have taken it personally.
And what would you say is the greatest achievement or accomplishment so far with your show? What that you maybe feel most proud of?
The most proud of is the feedback we get from people who say, this has really got me onto a journey. So I've had a couple messages, a couple of feedback from people who are saying like, this has really been helpful for me. Because one part of having a show, and you've experienced it as well, if you don't get a review, you don't get a subscription, we don't have an audience looking at us right now. So we can't get that instant feedback of, did they like the show, did they not? And so when you hear people saying, I listened to this episode and I really enjoyed it, and it's really motivated me to do something, that's been great. So that's been the most encouraging part for me, and it's also encouraged me to continue on.
It's wonderful. Some of the more consistent feedback that I've gotten about our show is that they have said the organic nature of the conversation and the, I would say, like gentleness that Scott and I we have. What would you say, or how would you describe people talking about your show?
Well, I think it's similar in terms of trying to make sure that it's conversational. So I'm really intentional with making sure it's conversational, and because I've been on the other side of podcast where it's purely scripted, and if it's a host, sometimes they want to make sure all their questions get answered rather than letting it flow. So I try to let it flow, and then if I hear something I really want, that I think the audience would really want to explore more, I try to dig in deeper in that. Even though I really wanted to talk about the guest who raised $3 million, I really wanted to talk about that, but she went off on another thing, and that really sounds interesting. So let's take the time to do that. So I think that's a key component that I like to do, is make people feel comfortable, because for a lot of people too, it might be their first time recording, and so you want to make sure they feel comfortable and make sure it's as natural as possible. So it's kind of like our audience is people, they're sitting alongside with us, having a coffee and listening to the conversation.
Sure. Can you share your pitch to a prospective guest? I'm curious how you convince them to be a guest. That's something that I have to do quite regularly.
Well, I think part of it is I'll do depending on the guest, I'll do research. Some of them I know them, so that's a little bit easier. Or some of them have been clients or are clients, so sometimes that's way easier.
Okay.
Because you have a relationship already. So anybody you have a relationship with, that's going to be easier. But let's say a cold person, I'll do research on that person beforehand, And then, like we just talked about the theme, I'll try to tie it into what we're trying to do with Bizmode. So I'll say, Bizmode, we help share your entrepreneurial journey, and we want to inspire others to pursue their own entrepreneurial journey. And your entrepreneurial journey is great, and I'd like to have you on to highlight these key things that you've done. If you're interested, let me know. And then that's kind of it. And
that seems good. Yeah. So I would imagine people would respond favorably to that.
I think so. It's just hard sometimes. I say it's hard or challenging because sometimes the communication you get is you're trying to find ways to contact them. And so if it's cold, so like I'll send a message through Instagram, I'll send a message to Twitter. Those are like 2 social mediums I use. And if they don't know me, they're kind of like, well, who's this strange person talking about Bizmode?
We're actually trying to get your guests on our show before you do.
That's right. You're trying. We're in a race. We're in a race for guests.
Well, I think you beat us to most of them, right?
Yeah, he beat us to Barney.
Yeah.
I don't know who else was on.
Yeah,
Carlos
Aguilar of Mestizo. He was on I think it was last season or the season before. he just launched it whenever he was on. He just launched it. So it was early 21, I think.
So we may have the edge only on Brenda. I don't know if you're trying to get
Brenda. Yeah, I haven't had Brenda on. So you got me on Brenda.
Well, one thing that really struck me early on doing this show was an interview of Larry King. And he said that he never prepared any questions ever. And he wanted to hold on to the magic of a real conversation. And when I heard that, I felt good that was our approach too, that we weren't going to preload any questions and just sort of have a conversation and let it flow, naturally. So you're doing the podcast, you're doing your own practice. What is the balance between those two things for you?
So it ebbs and flows. If obviously the practice takes precedent. So if practice is heavy, we're not going to do the podcast. What I'm endeavoring to do and what I've done, thankfully, so far for this season is really get the episodes batched and get everything recorded, so I don't really have to worry about like trying to find a guest. And so I think that's been helpful for me in terms of my workload and stuff like that. But obviously, the practice will take. I don't want the clients mad at me.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy one over the other?
They're different, right? So I would say they're different. So it's kind of like that, which is your favorite kid question. Podcasting's fun. It brings something out of me in terms of that sometimes I don't think I'm good at, but then you get the positive feedback, and so it's like, oh no, you're a great host, so you do a great job. So it feeds that creative side of me a lot. So I love doing the podcast because it does feed a ton of creative side. And then, of course, the business side is, our purpose is to help people build and grow their dreams. So doing the business side, helping people on that journey is helpful, is really enjoyable as well.
I recently learned that some people have an idea of podcast as, people sitting around drinking and smoking weed and just cussing. Like that was a realistic thing that their vision of a podcast, what they thought it was. Have you ever heard that?
Well, there is a popular podcast that's what they do. So I could see that. But the feedback I've got so far hasn't been from that.
They haven't asked you to start smoking.
They haven't smoked with me. I think one time we had it was again an organic thing. We had the guests it was a live one, and we did have beer.
Okay.
But I'm always worried about having a lot of stuff on tables because of the noise situation, as you all know. And so I didn't, it's like, okay, watch the glass on the table and stuff like that. But no, I'm not a fan myself of like 3-hour podcasts where something like that's happening.
Yeah. Well, Alex, we ask each guest to bring an item of significance with them. What did you bring with you today?
So speaking of my mom, so my mom every time she comes over, she brings something that she brings something I left at the house, right? So you leave stuff over years when you leave something in the house. So this was actually, she brought this, I think, right after we booked this session, and she brought this, which is essentially like what, for all people who are not or just listening, when you walk across the stage in your graduation, you get this little book that has it's kind of like a dummy diploma, because your diploma's not in there yet, but you get it when you cross the stage. And so I brought this here because it's significant to me, because I'm a big believer in higher education. I'm a big believer in in order for you to, if you want to aspire to do certain things, education is important to you. Recently there's been a lot of talk about, you don't need to go to school, you can drop out. Steve Jobs dropped out and he created Apple. Bill Gates did the same thing in Microsoft. Yes, certain people of certain privilege can do that, but not a lot of people, not me, the latchkey kid who's from an underrepresented group. I don't think I would have had the same opportunities that Bill Gates would have had. So education's key. So that's why I brought this. So this is my from my graduation at UC Berkeley.
Awesome. Thank you for bringing that in. So that's a segment that we do on our podcast. Our podcast, like I explained to you, is broken up into thirds, and that's one of our defining segments. Do you have segments on your show?
No, do not. It's actually an interesting thing to actually explore. No, I haven't done really segments. There's certain questions I will ask, and one question I like to ask is reflecting on an earlier part of your life. What would you tell your earlier self?
Oh,
that's a question I always like to ask.
We were playing around at lunch to see. So Scott is a math whiz. So can you give him a 4-digit number and see if he'll know if it's divisible by 3?
Ooh. Oh, 4-digit number? That'll be easy. See? Give me a 10-digit number.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know if I can come up with 10 digits.
Hold on. Let me put it in the calculator.
You have to put it in the calculator.
Okay. Let's go 8. Let's go 8. Here we go.
Okay. 725,343. Am I missing?
Yeah, it's divisible by 3. So exactly.
That's a 6. But let's see. Divide by 3.
That 3 was too easy.
Yeah, that was easy.
I shouldn't have ended with 3. I should have ended with like a.
And you said it very slowly, so it was really easy too. Yeah.
So maybe we will have that as a segment. We were just.
You got a whole. I used to have someone in my office just as a game, hold up like a 10-digit number for like a half a second, and I'd have to tell them, was it divisible by 3? Mm-hmm. This is one of my idiosyncrasies.
Has it helped you? Like, have you done
it's helped me greatly in life, because then I don't have to think about other stupid things. I haven't. I don't need to smoke pot or take drugs. I just divide numbers by 3.
Divide numbers by 3. That works.
Yeah, it's elevated me.
See, that was funny, right? That segment was funny.
and besides, now I know if a number is divisible by 3.
There you go.
I mean, that in itself is like...
That's the reward right there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you have plans to branch off or to do another, entrepreneurial venture?
I'll say I have a seed in my head.
Okay.
I don't know if it's planted yet of something potentially related to the law practice and the way we do things as transactional law, from starting up companies to working with contracts to stuff like that. I have something in there. It's just like you mentioned earlier, Russell, it's the energy and the inspiration. So I need energy and inspiration to actually make it, to plant the seed.
See, that's what I'm always talking to you about, right, Scott? Whenever he's talking about asking people or wanting people to do things, like I'm always saying, let's start with that. Make sure that they have that, because otherwise it's going to end soon, right? Without that,
right? You definitely have to have a purpose. I mean, some of these things sound like phooey, or I don't know what's a better description of that, but you definitely have to have a purpose and intention behind what you're doing. Why? So my question always to a new client that comes in or prospective client that comes in is, why do you want to do this? What's your motivation for it? So your motivation is, well, I hate my job. That's not really enough of a why for you, and it's not going to keep you grounded. It's not going to keep you going. And if the why is just money, it might not be the greatest thing as either. There's got to be a purpose behind what you're doing.
And that comes with the confidence and a maturity in a business or profession where you may not get that client, right? But you've made a good decision probably for yourself and for them to have them evaluate that at that point.
Right. And you're right. And that's something that's evolved with me as a professional, in terms of having the ability to say, we're not the perfect fit for each other. And, no one's going to be happy. I'm not going to be happy because I don't know what direction they're going. So how am I supposed to structure things for them? They're not going to be happy because they're going to feel like we're going in circles. But part of it's because they haven't looked inside to say, what are they going to do? But I'm in a fortunate space now where I can be selective with who I work with.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to get into one of the things that you have in common with some of our other guests, which is CASA, and sort of to understand what that's like for you and what you're getting from that. But let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
At Wormuth Law, they believe that just because you speak a foreign language, come from a different culture, or simply don't know how to navigate the legal system, that should not prevent you from compensation from injury or receiving benefits. Their multicultural staff have been helping SGVers like you for over 38 years. Visit law888.com or call them at 626-784-7017 and tell them you heard about them on this podcast.
All right, we're back with Alex. Alex, before the break, I mentioned CASA, and my understanding of it is that it's like a networking group, but can you share what that is?
It's a networking group, but I would say it's a networking group for that was probably crafted and molded from millennials and Gen Z folk, which is, it actually sprouted out of, from my understanding of it, it sprouted out of 2020 where people couldn't get together. I first got involved in the spring of 2020, so this is right after we started to stay home and lock down. And we met a lot through Zoom. We met a lot through other types of chat forums throughout the country, and we're using other kind of devices and platforms to it. But it is a networking, but it's also beyond networking. It's more of like there's really a support there for people who are trying to do their things, whether they're in the tech field and they're trying to go advance in the tech field, or like we've been discussing throughout this episode, if they're trying to pursue their own entrepreneurial, their own startup. How can we go ahead and support them or give them the help that they need?
So that's interesting. How did you get connected with a group like that?
Well, it was one of your guests that's going to be on, Isai.
Oh, he was on. Yeah. His show hasn't released yet, but okay.
So Isai Cortez was one of the first persons to bring me on, and I think it was we met. The connection, of course, was there's an attorney connection there, so it's easier to get. That's how we connected. But I believe we connected through social media, and he said, hey, there's this group you would fit in, and why don't you come in and chat with us?
So you were meeting with like-minded, or is it mostly entrepreneurial type spirits there?
There's a lot of entrepreneurial type spirits, but there's a lot of people also. There was a good number of people that were in tech, so they could be working for some bigger companies in tech. So there was also a tech component to it where people were like, they're helping with develop the product or help with operations and stuff like that. So there was some people there as well. So
you've experienced this group and also podcasting both virtually and when you're in an environment together. Do you have a preference? Do you feel like things are going to continue to stay separate and over online meetings, or what are your thoughts on that?
So it's kind of, I don't know if it's a double-edged sword is the right description of it, but there's pros and cons to both. I enjoy the idea that we can get remotely with people that I wouldn't have access to. Like I have I have clients who have they have business here in California, and but they're not in California, so I'm able to access them, and we're able to hop on a video. We're able to interact there. It's the same thing with networking, and sometimes it reduces those meetings that people joke about that could have been an email. It reduces those emails, so people don't have to come to my office and then commute back from my office just to have a meeting. So that's something that's a pro for it. The con is the kind of like the candidness of an in-person interactions. When we have video meetings, when we have Zoom meetings, sometimes we're very focused, very on script, very on what do we need to get done. It's for me, I found it difficult to be informal. For me, it's found me a little bit difficult to be kind of, you have like little candid conversations you can have. And so that's the part that I think is going to come back, and it has come back already. I've seen it come back in various forms in terms of people interacting in person again, because there is an element there, even in a work situation. So my office is a smaller office. We have 5 employees total, but everyone's been remote for a huge amount of time. But the times that we've been in office, there's been a magic to it, at least from my perspective. And we've done some great things when we're in the office. But of course, I understand that we need to be flexible with stuff. And yeah, I don't want people commuting and spend all their time in the car. But I do think there's going to be this whole hybrid scenario where people are kind of be more flexible with, they can get work done at home, but there's going to be times when they have to come in as well.
Yeah, that's I think you used the word magic. There is a certain magic when people are together that can't be replaced on a screen. No matter what you do, I think it's just lost in that sense. So, well, Alex, we're going to transition now to a part of the show, another segment, if you will, where we get to know a little bit more about you.
So, Alex, this is called the SGV3.
The SGV3, yes.
Yes. You've heard of it. It's obviously a famous concept.
It is.
Yes. We'd like to know 3 of your favorite places to go, things to do, experiences you've had in the San Gabriel Valley.
San Gabriel Valley, all right. So I'll start with, from my SGV3, I'll start with...
Oh, and 3 is divisible by 3.
You got it. All right, hold on.
Okay, that one worked.
Yeah,
Put
right.
it down. Wait. Yes, we need that applause. Cheers. So the first one is the Arboretum.
Okay.
The reason for me, it's just growing up. I remember going there really young, and I also remember growing up, Fantasy Island, for some of you that don't know, look it up on YouTube.
This is amazing. You know why this is amazing? I don't think either one of us knew that until yesterday when we had a guest whose favorite, one of their SGV3s was, is it the Queen Anne? It's not the Queen Anne, it's the...
It was Queen Anne's Cottage.
Queen Anne's Cottage.
That's what I didn't know the name of it. I just
Queen
like
Anne's
the cottage.
So just yesterday, she identified that as one of her favorites, and I never knew it. And now here you've.
So I'm
were you
reinforcing
listening?
it.
Or?
No, not yet. No. So I'm reinforcing that. So yes,
Wow.
no, definitely. So that's a fond memory I have, and it's just a beautiful thing to go to. We talked about being introspective. We talked about kind of trying to figure things out for yourself. That's a great place to meditate and think about things. That's my first one. Second one I would say is San Gabriel Valley has a great, there's a great mountain range, great trails starting at Pasadena, and you can explore so much out there. So, there's so many waterfalls, so many different things. If you want to go really east, go to Baldy, I got my geography right. But that's great to explore. So all the mountain ranges, all the trails out there, please go explore. Of course, I'm biased. I'm still a runner, even though I don't run as much as I used to. And so that was a great place to run for me.
Where do you like to run? Which trail is your favorite?
So I live close to Griffith Park, so everything in Griffith Park is my favorite.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite. But when I would come out here, we would go to the Rose Bowl and just start at the Rose Bowl and just start getting on the trails.
Yeah.
And start going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Griffith Park, Hollywood Peak is the really strenuous one. Is that right?
There's a couple of them. Yeah, I think so. I think that's, yeah.
It's a pretty steep climb to go to the top.
One time I've done it once to go to the sign. Like you're in the behind the sign. And it's super steep.
I've never been to the sign, but there is another trail in Griffith Park where you go to a landing at the top, and you can see 360 degrees. Do you know what that's called?
That's Hollywood Peak.
That is Hollywood Peak?
So Hollywood Peak is different from the sign, though.
The sign.
But it's in the similar area.
Yeah, I think I've gone to the flip side of Hollywood Peak, where we've gone and we've gone around the back.
Well, Hollywood Peak is good when you go straight up from. There's a place just near the observatory.
Is it I forget.
There's signs there pointing to how many miles to Berlin and to the Philippines. Yeah. Anyway, but if you go straight up, it's not really a trail.
That's right. It's not.
Yeah, but it's fast. But it's strenuous. Yeah. But you can't run it because you kind of climb it more.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So that's number 2 is just exploring the nature that you have here in San Gabriel Valley. So that would be number 2 for me. And number 3, I'm gonna just kind of bucket all together. The food scene here is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Okay, so ignore Yelp. Whatever Yelp tells you is wrong. Okay, for some parts. I got my first. You can get hot pot. You can get, I would say, authentic Chinese food. You can get. You can get pastrami at the Hat. You could get my first boba experience was here. So any type of food scene, any type of food you want is located in San Gabriel Valley. So that's my third one.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it is pretty incredible food scene. There's a YouTubers. I don't know if you know the Fong brothers. They were located here in San Gabriel Valley, and they've since moved to New York. But they've done like specials here, and even though I live here, just seeing it from someone else's perspective, it is quite special, the food here. Yeah.
Were they the ones that would do the 24-hour in other cities? Or is that another
I'm not
setup
sure.
for other-
That doesn't ring a bell.
Okay.
Yeah.
But no, it's always good to see someone else kind of appreciate your region's food.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. I mean, Indonesian, Filipino,
Everything.
Mexican, everything's here. Yeah. Well, Alex, how can people find you? You know, where are you located?
So my office is in Glendale. Feel free to reach out to gobismo.com, brunogroupinc.com. My social handles are My social handle is Alex Bruno ESQ. Look me up there and reach out.
So when you say social handles, that's like on Twitter, Instagram?
Twitter and Instagram.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing, insight into what it is that you do and a little bit about you as a person. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
Well, there you go. There's another episode for you. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. As always, you can find us sgvmasterkey.com. Send us an email. Let us know your thoughts at info@sgvmasterkey.com. And we'll see you again really soon in the next episode.
You've been listening to the SGV Master Key Podcast. Our passion is the small businesses and the people that make up the San Gabriel Valley, and it's our honor to have them on the show. We hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure to like, rate, and review. The show is produced by Russell Mano, edited by Victoria Allers of Kind Monster Productions. Thanks for listening, and see you next time on the SGV Master Key Podcast.
Master, no, kind of master.